Anyway, I wanted to discuss some more about longevity. I had the pleasure to interview Aubrey de Grey a couple of weeks back, and he had the claim that there's a 50% chance that there will actually be a cure for aging within the next 12 to 15 years. And that interview sparked a lot of comments here on YouTube. I think we're up to like 170 comments. But let me just start somewhere else. I actually asked here in the community whether you believe there would be a cure for aging before either 2030, so in just 6 years, or before 2040, or whether it's all kind of sci-fi talk and a real cure for aging will not happen for the next 100 years. Um, so I do think my audience here on YouTube is quite pro innovation and pro AI. So what we did see was actually 29% of you believe that there would be a cure for aging before 2030. So that's actually more optimistic than Aubrey de Grey himself. It's more aligned with what, for example, Ray Kurzweil is saying, that along with AGI, we'll more or less get a cure on aging at the same time, so before 2030. The majority of you guys thought that uh, it would happen before 2040, so pretty much aligned with what Aubrey de Grey is saying, as he is projecting a cure for aging between 2036 and 39 with a 50% probability. So 54% of you guys thought that yes, it would be available by then. Um, and then only 17% of you said it's just sci-fi. It's not going to happen, not at least for the next 100 years. And I do find this quite interesting and also refreshing because I mean, if somebody mentioned 10 or 15 years ago that there would be a cure for aging within our lifetimes, well, people would be ready to lock you up pretty much, because I mean, it would just be deemed so unrealistic that nobody would really listen to you. And I think that is starting to change. I'm still getting a lot of that feedback that it's not likely that this will happen in our lifetimes, but I'm getting more and more people who are changing from disbelief to, I think, general curiosity. So I think this is very positive, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But first, the title of the video is: Would you take a longevity pill if it was available? So please, if you have the opportunity to comment, please do so. For me, it would be a very easy choice. I would definitely take a longevity pill, and I would persuade my wife to do the same, and my kids to do the same. Um, and I think there are a couple of points to that. So some of the people I've spoken to who said, no, I wouldn't take that pill if it was available. Their argument is it's no fun living till you say you are 200 years old because it's no fun being old. And here I think the important point is a longevity pill or a longevity treatment, as for example, David Sinclair or Aubrey de Grey describe it, is is not about being old for long. It's actually about stopping your biological clock and even reversing it when that is possible. So, for example, I'm 51 years old. If it was available in 15 years, I would be 66 and hopefully still in pretty good health. So at that point, at 66, the point of the treatment would be to give any person who took that treatment a few years back. I mean, in the way that they would actually start to feel younger right away. So perhaps that person would feel, let's say, 5 years younger after the treatment. So you would be reversed to a biological age of, let's say, 59. And by the time, another 5 years pass, you could then get a new treatment that would maybe make you 7 or 8 years younger biologically. So it's not about just adding years. It's about adding healthy years to your lifespan. So I think it's very important that we wouldn't have an Earth with a lot of like biologically old people walking around. We would actually be in a situation where people would be fit and they would be able to contribute to society. So I think it would be very positive for everyone. It would probably also cure most of the diseases we have out there, because most diseases are age related. I mean, let's look at cancer, for example. And for example, I mean, you do see younger people getting cancer, but the majority of people getting cancer, um, they are actually older. So in many ways, it's a disease caused by aging. So if you cure aging, you'll probably cure most cancers at the same time. Um, the same would be for dementia. So we would have a much more healthy society, and we would have a society where I think the healthcare costs would actually be less and not more. So I think there's a lot of logical arguments for why you should take a longevity pill if it was available. Um, so of course, there are other arguments against taking a longevity pill if it is available. One is saying, okay, I might be fit, but I would become bored. I wouldn't know what to do with my time if I was going to live 2, 3, or 400 years. And I also disagree with that point. I think there will always be things to do. I decided, for example, to step out of my corporate career already at 50, and I can't find the time to do all the things I want to do. I want to do these YouTube videos. I want to interview different experts in innovation. I want to do consulting. I want to travel. I want to be with my kids. I want to be with my wife. I want to go to the fitness center to kind of restore my own biological age to a younger point in time, and there's simply not enough time. And I think when people say, I'm actually fed up on life, I think it has a lot to do with chemistry. I think it has a lot to do with that when people get older, the chemistry inside the body changes. You do start to feel pain in many of the joints. You do start to get some diseases. So I think if we're able to eradicate that and give people back the energy, I do think they will have the appetite for life, the appetite to travel and do all these things. Um, so personally, I do not agree with that argument. Um, and yeah, so another argument is that living longer is actually selfish. Um, And I don't know. I don't think it's selfish. I mean, it of course depends on, are you contributing in a positive way to the earth and to society? You can of course say, well, if you live longer, then you will also have more time to, for example, to pollute, which is of course a net negative. On the other hand, you can also help society develop. You can help society get new technologies that will actually clean up the environment. So looking at it that way, for example, if aging in a healthy way and not being biologically older means that we'll have a more productive society, and I'm pretty sure that would be the result, then when you're looking at a lot of the richest countries in the world, we are actually seeing that they're starting to pollute less. They may actually, spend more energy. But even there, we do see in some countries, especially in Europe, where the more evolved they get, the more efficient they are with their energy. But even more, if we look at, for example, how clean the oceans are or how clean the air is, we actually do see as countries become richer, they also become cleaner. And I think a country where you have a lot of 100+ years old, but in great health and very sharp cognitively, I think they would add to a lot of growth. And I think, so net it would be better for the environment. Secondly, I've traveled over most of the world, at least I think it's like 60 countries by now. And to me, the Earth does not seem populated. I mean, there are areas that are quite dense in population, but most areas are quite rural, actually. So it's not a question of there's not enough space on Earth. And so it's more about a resource question, which I think the richer and the more advanced we'll get in terms of technology, the more we'll actually be able to feed more people on the planet than we have now, and we'll also have the energy resources to take care of everything we need. Um, It's actually interesting when I come across people who are very negative about stopping the aging clock or longevity escape velocity, which basically means the same thing. It's the same people who say it's absolutely impossible to the people who don't want it and are scared of it, which is kind of interesting to me. So, I mean, if you think it will never happen, that is just sci-fi, why would you then be so concerned? It's actually exactly the same as with AGI. It's the same people who say, um, artificial intelligence is a terrible thing. AGI would be the worst possible thing for the Earth, and then normally they turn around and say, well, and it's never going to happen. The large language models, they're not very intelligent, and uh, um, so it will simply not happen. But what I don't get is why would you be so concerned about it if it's not happening anyway? I've seen quite a few points of people saying it's not going to happen. Some with the argument saying, well, the body is just too complex. They may still be correct. Um, But I also saw the argument a couple of times of people saying, no, God would not allow something like longevity, escape velocity. He would not allow there to be kind of a magic treatment that could help us live a lot longer. Um, but I think when you look across history, there have probably been many points where you would have used that argument. For example, when it was first suggested that the Earth was round and not flat, the leaders in Rome said, well, that is not possible because then certainly um, Rome would no longer be the center of the Earth because if the Earth is rounded, there is no center, right? Um, Later, before we had cars, I'm sure people would be saying it's impossible to have a motor vehicle. And after we had cars, many people say, yeah, but it's impossible to fly. And yet we were able to fly. And I think it's kind of the same with medical advances. Sometimes we forget that we've come quite far. I mean, for example, we've almost cured the death rate in terms of many of the child diseases that were killing so many. Just a couple of 100 years ago, the average longevity was only like between 30 and 40 years, depending on which country you were in. And today we're up at 80. And you would of course say, well, those are the low hanging fruits. Still 200 years ago, you would see people who could live like 80 or 90 or even 100 years. And and that is totally correct. Uh, you did see people that lived that long. And what people like Aubrey de Grey and Ray Kurzweil and David Sinclair are suggesting is not that it's the same technological advances that will bring us to 150 years. I mean, what they're basically saying is we're looking at new technologies that will do this. And I think when people say it's impossible, then they're saying, well, these new technologies will not emerge. And still, I mean, the jury is out on this. We do not know. Um, but at least we have gone from a situation where people were dismissing it 100% till now where they're actually starting to discuss it. I think one really interesting point here is I think we're still talking about maybe 5% of the population, or probably a lot less, even in the States and in Europe, who are considering this possibility that we could extend our lifespans significantly. Um, but what happens when, let's say, 30 or 40 or 50% of the population actually believes that it is likely that they will not die from aging? I think, I mean, even myself and the peers I discussed this with, we're still not giving each other the mental permission to actually believe that we will live that much longer. I mean, even if I look at myself as a person, I listen to Aubrey de Grey, to David Sinclair, and Kurzweil, and I say, well, it might happen. So what that changes for me is I'll say, okay, so I will not live as if I'm going to uh, die as young as my parents did, because they died in their 70s, and my dad in his early 80s. But at least I'm keeping an option open that I will be like 100+ years old in good health. Um, but I'm not yet giving myself mental permission to believe that I will probably become 150 years, even though I'm doing these videos. But I think that could change. I think the closer we actually get to seeing a real tangible evidence that these treatments are going to work, and we see some of these treatments being applied. For example, there's the zombie cell treatment that is almost ready, and it is likely to give you back about 5 years. And then we'll later see, the second treatment with that would like extend the lengthening of the telomeres, and then we'll see more advanced cell therapies. And once we see that these are working and they're adding years to our lives, I think something will change drastically mentally, because the second we have tangible evidence that this is real and that we may live 150 plus years, I think we're going to think differently about a lot of things. I think we're going to think much more long term in terms of our goals, for example, like what is achievable. So, for example, like starting a YouTube channel, right? When you are 18 years old, you feel you have your whole life ahead of you. So even if you fail the first 5 years, it's no problem, right? You will have 25, 30 years to actually reach a large audience. But if you started at 70 years old today, you would say, I'm too old to do it. I'll not have time to be successful. But then suddenly, if we said, well, most likely I'll be 150 plus years in good health, you would say, well, I have time to do everything. I have time to do all the travel I want to do. I will have time for my friends. But most of all, I'll have time to some really, really big projects that make a huge impact on the earth. So I think that kind of long-term view and those long-term goals we will start to adopt could be very beneficial for society. Um, so what I also heard from people is a lot of saying, yeah, but this will only be for the rich. And again, maybe I'm just an optimist. I don't think that is true in the long term. Um, if we look at most medicines, they are coming down in price, and even like immune therapy for cancer, are in many European countries, and I guess the US as well, being used, even though it can cost up to like $100,000 per treatment. Um, because I mean, the state does put an emphasis on keeping people alive. Even I mean, the mathematical equation of giving an older person an immune therapy for cancer is not a positive one, right? I mean, most likely it may not work. Secondly, if it works, it will add a few years if the person is already old. Um, and thirdly, it's probably not going to add active years. Most people who get these treatments are at the retirement age anyway, right? So I do think that the state is not always that cynical. They actually say, let's do this anyway. Um, and I also think these treatments will come down in cost, right? I mean, getting a full screen of your DNA used to cost ten thousands of dollars, and was out of reach for most people. And now today it can be done, I think, for a few $100s. And the same goes with testing your biological age. Um, and for example, if you follow Brian Johnson, the guy, the tech millionaire who's basically using millions every year to keep himself young, I think many of the things he does today is out of reach for most of us. But then again, when you scale these technologies, then the price comes down really, really quickly. So I think that there's both the dynamic of the costs will continue to go down, but there's also the dynamic that uh, the state is often not that cynical when it comes to which treatments are allowed. Um, so I do think we will see pushes from both stateside and from the government and from the economies of scale to make sure that these treatments will be available for everyone. And then one more question I had was, would people have a choice whether or not to accept these treatments? And it's actually interesting. I do think definitely people will have a choice. I guess the question comes from uh, maybe from the pandemic, where uh, I think a lot of people felt pressured to actually get the vaccination against COVID, right? So would getting the vaccination against aging be the same? That is almost like forced upon you? I don't think so. So I think the reason for almost forcing people to take the COVID vaccine is the effect that it's contagious, right? So you will impact other people negatively if you don't get it. Um, but when it's about aging, of course, you can say, well, you will impact society negatively by aging like you normally do, but mostly you're going to impact yourself. So I think it will definitely be a choice. It's for many years it's probably going to be something you would have to fund yourself, even if it's not that expensive. So I don't think it's going to be mandatory. I mean, if you get cancer, for example, being treated is not mandatory. You still have a choice of rejecting the treatment. So I think definitely that would be part of it. So another thing I wanted to discuss are the difference in views between all these different experts. You know, there are many smart people out there talking about longevity, but why don't they agree? I mean, why are we in a situation where they're all saying something different? So you could say, I'm not sure they're actually saying that different things. I more think they have a different focus. So for example, you would have the club of people who are actually trying to cure aging, where that is the focus, and maybe I wouldn't call him extreme, but you could say a guy like Aubrey de Grey, for example. He is not very focused, as far as I can understand, on lifestyle goals. So for him, the focus is all about how to cure aging. So actually inventing the technology that will actually cure aging for a lot of people. So his focus is biomedical repair. So he wants to repair the cellular damage, and to some extent, I think um, uh, he may believe that repair or replace. So sometimes it would make sense to replace organs, like 3D printing new organs, for example. He doesn't believe a lot in supplements. So what he's saying is, we don't need these treatments to be perfect. We just need to be quite comprehensive in terms of rejuvenation and repairing different organs. What he's also emphasizing as one of the most important things is um, that you will die from your weak point. If I should take my own example, so I don't know at this point what my weak point is. It could be my lungs, for example. So I have asthma, and if I do like a test for my lungs, it would say I'm maybe 70 years old, because the lung function is not perfect because of my asthma, right? So let's say that's my weak point. So it doesn't help if I get the muscle strength of somebody who is 20 if in the end my lungs continue to decline. Then they could kill me, because I can't breathe, basically, and it wouldn't help me to have a lot of muscle mass, right? So what he's saying is, be very aware of your weak point and try to hit that point first, so you don't focus on the wrong thing. He does not buy a lot of into, for example, supplements, or he doesn't talk a lot about exercise. I mean, he may say that it's important to sleep, but again, it doesn't seem critical. What seems critical to Aubrey is to get as much funding to the science as possible, so we can accelerate the time that it takes to get to longevity escape velocity. So that is where his head at. I don't think if you ask him saying, okay, I want to survive until longevity escape, what are the velocity, what should I do? He would probably say, yeah, just do what makes sense. Don't smoke, don't be overweight, do a little bit of exercise. Don't be too stressed out. Get your sleep. So he wouldn't say anything crazy like, yeah, yeah, eat whatever you want, or go crazy on cigarettes, right? So he would still say, you should follow that advice. At least that's how I understood it. But more importantly, make sure you don't have that weak point that ends up killing you. That is still quite different to a guy like David Sinclair, for example, where he believes that, for example, uh, especially supplements, he focuses a lot more on supplements than, for example, Aubrey de Grey does. So he's more into, yes, let's cure aging by looking at the mo- the molecules and those pathways, and but also slow current aging by taking a lot of different supplements. So so I think his approach is slightly different to Aubrey de Grey. And then we have, for example, Kurzweil. So Kurzweil is not similar to David Sinclair or Aubrey de Grey, because he does not sit in a lab trying to cure aging. What he does is he observes, right? And he's more into artificial intelligence. And I think he more looks at the development of technology and say, because we're now at a stage where we are with artificial intelligence, uh, just continuing that path of doubling the AI compute will lead to us curing aging within a relatively short time frame. So I think what he's alluding to is that once you have AGI, um, you can, like in theory, 1,000x the number of uh, uh, people working in labs, because you would just have the AIs actually working in the labs. So uh, reaching that level of AGI will just be critical to actually simulate all the possible ways that you can cure aging. So I don't think he subscribes to like a particular treatment the way David Sinclair or Aubrey de Grey does. He more attributes it to reaching a certain level of artificial intelligence that then kind of will help solve these human problems. Then I think we have a whole cohort of people who are not so much looking into the future and looking at curing aging, but they're rather looking at, what can you do, what can you work with currently to make sure that you reduce your biological aging. I think Brian Johnson is probably the most interesting one here. So I do know that Brian, he gets a lot of hate. People saying he looks like a vampire, that he's kind of weird. Um, I also thought so in the beginning, but to be honest, I think he's doing something really really positive for mankind, because he is basically putting himself in as a guinea pig. He's saying, okay, let's try everything and let's measure my own body and see how it reacts. And then in that way, we'll increase the data we have on what works and what doesn't work. So in one way, of course, you can say he's getting a lot of benefits by being the guinea pig. On the other hand, it's going to be very costly, and also that there's no guarantee that some of these treatments might not actually be bad for his body. Um, so I think he's kind of in the middle. So he's not a scientist himself, but his approach is so data driven and scientific that he will actually help kind of cure aging, because the data he collects can go into the research that David Sinclair and Aubrey de Grey and other scientists in the labs are using to cure and slow aging. So in that way, I think it definitely has an impact. Um, so looking at what Brian does is he's basically, well, trying all the methods to stop aging, right? And um, he is putting a lot of emphasis on getting perfect sleep, having the perfect exercise routine. But again, when I say exercise is important here, it's finding a balance, right? So he's trying to find out how much should you exercise. It's not about exercising all the time. How much quality sleep should you get? It's probably like 7 to 8 hours. And then also, like, he's taking a ton of supplements, so trying to suss out which ones are important. So I think uh, Brian now developed the blueprint products, and I haven't tried them yet. And definitely, it's going to receive a lot of criticism, the blueprint products, because people say, well, now he's going to try to make money from his fame, right? Now he's going to sell his products. That said, I think one of the challenges for people is to get started, right? So you might say, oh, I don't know what to do. Should I take supplements? Should I do exercise? Should I stop smoking even? And I guess the answers to all these questions is yes, you should definitely stop smoking. You should, get your weight down and your fat percent down to some reasonable level. You should be active and do exercise. You should eat a diet, probably that's relatively low in carbs and will contain the proteins and the vitamins you need, right? So I think it's important that people are given easier options to do this. So you might say, well, his blueprint um, program is not perfect. It's there so he can make money, and probably he does. But I do think if it makes it more accessible and cheaper to actually pick something and then actually focus on it, I think it's pretty much it's doing a good thing. So anyway, I think I will conclude it there. I think the important thing about this whole debate about longevity and what you should do and who you should believe, I think don't let it stop you that they're saying something different. I think the takeaways I'm taking myself and the takeaways I would like you to take away from this is, first of all, try to have a positive attitude. Increased longevity would definitely be, I think, a positive for most people because it's like adding quality years to life, not just more years. On top of that, um, I think we are getting into a situation where we can now discuss it without being called crazy. I think that's very positive. And when we start to believe that there's actually a chance for an extended health and lifespan that really matters, I think it's definitely worth then to try to take some of the advice to lower your own biological aging so you arrive in one piece. I mean, look at it this way, right? Maybe before, if you didn't really do anything, followed any of this advice for longevity, you would live 80 years, right? And you would be healthy till you're like 70. But if with the advice you can see out there can make sure that you live to 90, but you're really healthy to 80, well, maybe then you would actually come into this longevity escape velocity loop where you can start to reverse your aging, your biological age. So you could say the dividend of actually trying to be healthy now is so much greater than it used to be. So instead of saying, do nothing. There's no reason to listen to all of these guys. And I mean, I analyze what is Peter Attia saying, what is Brian Johnson saying, what is Seaman saying, what is David Sinclair saying, what is Aubrey de Grey saying, what is Kurzweil saying, what is Walter Longo saying, what is Mark Hyman saying, and they're all saying something slightly different, right? But even Aubrey, who says, the most important thing is financing, and I think, well, first of all, I think we should all be doing more to kind of spread the word, which will help the financing actually, put more money into longevity research. But then secondly, I think we should do all we can to kind of slow down our own biological aging. And if you look at something like the rejuvenationolympics.com, you can see that quite a lot of people, they have slowed their aging with the current means, which is basically just a healthy lifestyle and supplements, by about 40%. So, I mean, this really matters, right? If you're 50 today and you start your healthy lifestyle today, let's say your biological age is also 50, and you reduce the rate at which you age by 40%, right? Then in let's say 30 years, instead of aging 30 years, you would only age 18 years, right? So if it takes 30 years until longevity escape velocity, but you are able to reduce your own aging by 40%, well, then you would only be 68 and biologically and quite potentially in great health to take care or to take advantage of these treatments. So I think that is more than enough reason in my book to take some of these lifestyle choices, right? And instead of being really confused and saying, well, they don't agree, then we'll say, okay, uh, do implement a supplement stack. You can they might disagree on something, but like the omega-3 is a good example. I think they all say that is beneficial. So maybe just like implement a more limited supplement stack that most doctors agree on is beneficial. You can also do like get your blood work done and see what you need more of. Exercise. Definitely. So while there's disagreement whether you should run or walk or do strength training, there's definitely evidence that having muscle, so doing like light strength training, making sure you're active by walking and biking and cycling or swimming or whatever, well, that will be beneficial for you. You don't need to go crazy, but that will slow your aging. Um, and again, of course, keeping your weight down together with the diet will definitely slow your aging. I think there's no doubt that, lowering your stress levels and getting quality sleep will help your levels as well. So I think one way to actually improve all of this is to start some type of measurement, whether you want your biological test taken to measure your biological age. I think that's kind of a personal choice, but you can measure other things, right? You can measure like how fast can you run or walk 5 kilometers. um, how strong are you? It could be your bench press or another parameter. You could have some wearables telling you, the quality of your sleep or your heart rate and so on. So I would say, it's not about getting it perfect. It's about getting it better than average and a lot better than it is now. So I think, um, to conclude this, try to take, some of the advice all of these experts mostly agree on, and implement it in your life. But I would love to hear your comments and your thoughts, and thanks again for watching.